Sue Murphy, and I proudly serve as the president of the Robert H. Jackson Center. It's my distinct pleasure to welcome you all here this evening for this very special tribute to Randy Sweeney, honoring his longtime leadership benefiting countless individuals and organizations throughout Chautauqua County. Our board chair, Stan Lundeen, sends his regrets for not being here in person and asked me to share this message. Randy, my sincere thanks for all that you have done for our community, for the Community Foundation, the Jackson Center, and countless other organizations. You have provided a steady hand, a voice of reason, and a clear and unwavering commitment. Our community is a better place because of your service. My very best to you as you begin the next chapter of your journey. Stan. Likewise, I can't emphasize enough the importance of the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation to that long-term sustainability. It's because of the Community Foundation that so many nonprofits such as ours can even dream of developing long-term sustainability through endowment. The Community Foundation provides the accounting, investment oversight, reporting, and professional management required that most nonprofits, like the Jackson Center, simply do not have the budget or personnel to even dream of executing in-house. Randy and his team work tirelessly to ensure that donors who wish to support programs and organizations in the Chautauqua region have a reliable and trusted entity which enables them to do so. Chautauqua region nonprofits are all so very fortunate to be able to direct our donors to the Community Foundation and to partner with them to execute our donors' wishes and steward their endowment gifts on an ongoing basis. Now, on page 12 of your newsletter, we feature Randy in an article expressing our gratitude for all that he has done for our entire community, and we also feature one of the newest endowment funds established in support of the Jackson Center to honor Randy and to sustain in perpetuity his emphasis on the importance of education, and specifically for, quote, advancing educational initiatives aimed at engaging the community with priority given to programs working with local schools. So if you are thinking about a way you might support the Jackson Center and honor Randy Sweeney's legacy, I offer that this is possibly the perfect gift vehicle for you. Please speak with any of the Jackson Center or CRCF staff members if you have any questions that we can assist you with. And now, I would like to invite Jackson Center founding board member and longtime Chautauqua Region Community Foundation board member, Jeanette Carlson, to the podium to share her reflections on Randy. Thank you.
Well, good evening. When I was asked to say a few words about Randy Sweeney, I thought, where do I start? As there is so much to say about Randy. I guess the first place to start is when I first met Randy a little over 20 years ago. I was on the search committee when we were interviewing for a new executive director of the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation, and Randy was one of the highly qualified applicants interviewed for the position. What a lucky day for the foundation and for the community when the board approved our recommendation. Randy has been an excellent executive director these past 20 years. There are a lot of adjectives I could use to describe Randy. He's hardworking, he's straightforward, he's trustworthy, he's loyal, he's caring, he's calm, he's patient, he's diplomatic, and he's detailed. And I'm sure there are a few more adjectives that I could use. As for hardworking, he is in his office early in the morning, and many times his working hours extend into the evening. I remember one time asking Peggy, how do you keep track of Randy? Because he's off doing this or that, and it doesn't matter, it's during the day or in the evening. And she says, well, we have a large calendar. in the kitchen. And she says, and Randy puts down every event or whatever he has to do on that calendar, and he also indicates if I'm expected to be with him. And so we know that Randy wasn't home many evenings. Thanks, Peggy, for being so understanding, because sometimes I'm sure it can be very difficult trying to schedule in, many of the things that Randy had to do. For Randy, it is important to be out personally, establishing relationships with people in our community. He knows just about everything he needs to know about every organization in our community. Not only did I have the privilege of working with Randy at the Community Foundation as a board member, but also when we were both involved with other organizations such as the Robert H. Jackson Center. Randy and I were involved with the Robert Jackson Center for many years as board members. When discussions started back in the year 2000 between Greg Peterson, Betty Lene, Tom Cardman of the Gebbe Foundation, and my brother Carl Kappa, about the possibility of a Robert H. Jackson Center, my brother had such confidence in Randy that he asked him to please become involved with the planning of the center. Randy has stayed involved for 17 years. A few times I hear a little teasing here and there about Randy's picture always being in the Post Journal. See, many of you are familiar with the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. If Good Housekeeping endorsed a product, you immediately assumed it was a good product. Well, for me, seeing Randy's picture in the newspaper was like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. It gave me the sense of assurance that it was a good thing. Randy, thank you for the 20 selfless years you have given this community. In your retirement, sit back and relax, at least for a little while. And I wish both you and Peggy the very best in the future.
Don't sit back and relax yet. Susan, Jeanette, that's all nice, warm and fuzzy stuff. For those that know Randy as a button-down, white-collar, tie guy, we hope to dispel that tonight. There are certain alter egos that some of you don't know, and since we're not going to have very few opportunities to actually share this was a good night tonight to do that. We have this on film, and we'll be sharing it thereafter. Before we get started, just a few wonderful shout-outs. One, Assemblyman Goodell is here, thank you, and he has a citation here for you, Randy, and it's not a motor vehicle citation. New York State Assembly Certificate of Merit, congratulations to Randy Sweeney on your retirement. Thank you for your enormous contributions to our community. Signed, Andy Goodell, and we can put that on eBay, okay? Thank you, Andy. Also, I mentioned Peggy Sweeney, who's been a good sport, and on the calendar that Randy created, it was noted that she is supposed to show up tonight, and she dutifully did so. So thank you. And most importantly, thank you for bringing Randy's father, Don Sweeney. And Don, thank you for coming. This will be a fun evening. For those that don't know, Don is featured on YouTube. Don had an opportunity of a lifetime to ride in a car driven by Dick Barton, for you state line guys in the second row here. Dick drove a car, and Don was second seat in the car. And what I thought when we went up there to videotape it and capture this moment, I thought it was just going to be one of those, ride-arounds. And little did I realize it was not a ride-around. And in fact, there was a race. We was in third place, Shockingly, I thought Dick was just going to go down, ride around, let Don out of the car, and then, take a picture. Life was good. All of a sudden, the flags go down, and off the race goes, and there's 10 cars out there. And there's Dick moving away up this pack, and there's Don in the seat. Unbelievable. And as he said, the biggest problem was that, you know, you're supposed to have the shield, and you got those things that as you get dirt on the shield, you keep, you know, taking them off. Well, unfortunately, they forgot to do that for poor Don. So Don's got his glasses on. You know there's no windshield. I mean, it's just dirt flying in. He looked wonderful. So if you go on YouTube and type in Don Sweeney, it's a magic moment. But that was all really made possible as a gift, Father's Day gift from Randy to his dad, and that was a very meaningful day. There are many people here tonight who've come to share. Many more wanted to come. The weather precluded them from making here. Several calls suggesting that they wanted to make sure we hugged you, Randy. So we'll spend the rest of the night hugging you on their behalves. Before we get into the interview, I wanted to show just one little small piece of Randy's alter ego. This occurred in 1999, and Randy went undercover. And not many people picked up on this, but it made national and then international news. We caught it, we captured it. It's buried on YouTube. You can watch it if you didn't get the full brunt of it today. So, Ed, if we're about ready, let's just show something on Randy Sweeney.
Roosevelt visits Chautauqua Institution. We'll show you the reenactment after this.
Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Theodore Roosevelt. It is the result of untiring energy, and now is one of the greatest educational forces from the Atlantic to the Pacific. I salute you today for your perseverance and dedication to this mission. Congratulations to you on this great day. Bully Chautauqua!
It was a reenactment commemorating Teddy Roosevelt's visit to Chautauqua Institution 100 years ago on this very day in 1899.
It was an inspirational speech that he made 100 years ago, and he was, you know, trying to encourage the those that were in attendance, you know, to be focused on the government, looking at the legislators, making sure they were doing what they should be doing, certainly focusing on a period in time in history when the country was going through some transitions. It was very interesting that the things that he said 100 years ago still were very much part of a speech that can be made today.
Oh, how did you get conned into becoming Theodore Roosevelt?
Well, I remember the phone call. I believe it was a phone call from you. Does that surprise anyone?
Keep in mind, the Jackson Center started in 2001, so this was 1999.
And apparently, your law colleague, Marty Idzik, and you were aware of this particular event coming up, this 100th anniversary of Theodore Roosevelt's speech. And the two of them decided that I looked like Theodore Roosevelt, so that was close enough as far as they were concerned for me to participate in this. I did go look up the actual speech. I did change a fair amount of it. It was written in a vernacular of that time, but no, we had some fun with that. I wish that hat had fit just a little bit better, but.
Don't you think, though, there was a likeness? It really was. So, what do you think about all these nice things that Jeanette and Susan were saying about you?
Well, I certainly am humbled by all of this. You know, obviously I was raised in a, certainly an environment with a great family. Was taught a lot of the things in life. A lot of it had to do with how do you want to be treated. And I guess I've tried to live by that as things come up and as situations, cross my pathway. How would I want to be treated if I was in a similar position? So I want to thank Jeanette for those kind words, and I certainly am thankful for everything that everyone has commented on. I didn't realize I had that many friends, you know, so.
Have you always been like this?
Yeah, I think so. What you see is what you get, I guess, so. Yeah.
So, well, let's go back to the beginning. You were born in where? Where's hometown?
Born here in Jamestown, WCA Hospital. We won't get into the ride to the, you know, to the hospital, where apparently my grandmother was telling my father to not drive so fast, but that's another story too.
Right.
But yeah, grew up in Niobe, New York.
Not everybody might not know where Niobe, New York is, so why don't you explain?
Well, it's certainly down the corner of New York State. We're not too far, 5 miles from Panama and probably 3 to 5 miles from Bear Lake, Pennsylvania.
All roads lead to Niobe.
That's true. All roads lead to Niobe, as he indicated. Niobe is only 3 corners. It never had 4 corners. It was one of the great disappointments for all of us that were residents there. But we worked our way through it. But, you know, it was a very, very simple, it was a small town. There were a lot of young people, had a lot of friends. You know, if we had a baseball glove and a ball and a basketball and a football, what else did we need? What's that? And a shovel. That came later. My dad, we had a small farm, just 17.5 acres, and my brother and I earned $100 over the course of time, and we each bought a white-faced Hereford, and we began to raise beef cattle, so we did that for a while. And then, again, my dad was good with a to-do list, and he felt when we got to be, I think I was about 12 or 13, when he decided the 2 local cemeteries needed our family to take care of them. And that really turned out to be one of the best summer jobs, year-round jobs actually, because we took care of the grave digging and the whole works. And I tell the story about digging graves. Most of the time we dug them by hand. And it was all due to economics. The economics were is if we hired the guy with the backhoe, we had to pay him $25. And to open a grave was only $35, so you netted only 10. Well, if you dug it yourself, the whole 35 was yours. So apparently that's part of the reason I've had 2 back surgeries in the last few years. Digging graves by hand. And it's an interesting, we have a lot of tales, and I don't want to take up a lot of time with grave digging. Yeah.
Give me your best grave digging story.
Well, there's really 2. One of them I'll tell very quickly is the day that when you knew it. And by the way, those of you who think that graves are 6 foot deep, that's not true. They're only 5, and 5 feet was right at your eye line. And I was just finishing one up, and I had to make sure that it was always nice and square because the inspector would stop and check on me, my father. And as he was driving by, I started waving, because as I was finishing up, I began to see some trickle of the dirt on the walls, and the whole thing caved in. And if I hadn't jumped out, I probably would have been buried there, literally. So that was one scary time. We learned after that exactly how to handle all the weight of the excess dirt that we were throwing out. The second one, quickly, was a winter night when we were up at the cemetery. And I say a winter night, and it was, you know, the first thing you had to plow your way to the site where the grave was going to be. And then you had to identify the site, which was always difficult in the wintertime with all the snow. And then the first thing is you had to cut off the sod and set that aside, and then begin the process of digging. And somewhere in that evening, wind blowing through the trees, it's dark, you can sort of see the atmosphere, it's cold. The kid across the street comes over, and all of a sudden somebody says, "Hey, how you doing?" Well, we sort of got scraped off the nearest tree, is what that you're sort of wondering what was going on there, but it was a great time to grow up in. We worked hard. My grandfather had a dairy farm. He was about a mile away, and we were there a lot. People used to ask about spring break. I said spring break for us was fixing fence and hauling the manure pile away out back of the barn, because we got to drive the tractor. Yeah. And the thing was, we were too foolish to know that maybe this wasn't the best way to live, but we certainly grew up knowing what a good day's work was all about.
Also, with that manure, it really cleansed the senses.
It did.
You know, it really
It
did.
did.
You never,
Yeah.
never had a cold.
No, no. Never worried about that. Yeah,
That happens at times.
yeah.
So where did you go to school?
Went to school at Panama. Enjoyed that small school a great deal. Played basketball and ran track. Stayed away from football because I never wanted to get hurt because I wanted to play basketball. Basketball was the sport, so really enjoyed that time there.
Do you have a nickname for you?
Not that I recall.
Scooter or
No,
anything like that?
no.
Slick, Sweeney, or
No.
anything like that? No?
No.
So you didn't play football, you played basketball, you ran track. Were there kind of role models at school, teachers, like we know Jackson, Mary Willard? Was there somebody that was sort of a Randy Sweeney?
Well, an interesting thing happened, and actually it was in my junior year. I had completed all the necessary requirements as far as the course offerings, so my senior year I decided to try something a little different, and I took several business courses, which normally I wouldn't have ever thought about taking. And, you know, I really liked this business. I took several business courses, accounting, and that really, Gus Erickson was the teacher, and that changed my whole direction on my career. Immediately after that, I decided that a business administration direction was something I wanted to look into. I went to JCC, and so I thank him a great deal. We do have an endowment fund, a scholarship fund in his memory at the foundation, and he really made a difference in my life. And on the athletic side, I had some different coaches, but that one coach and he was my track coach, but I knew of him certainly as athletic director and also as the football coach, was Jack Keeney. Jack Keeney was an icon in our, in the school. Everybody looked up to him. I'd say a lot of people were not only being respectful, but they were a little scared of him because he had that demeanor. But Jack really was someone looked up to, and I've been fortunate to reach out to the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame, and we're working on putting...
Which is headed by whom?
Currently, the president of the board of the Chautauqua Sports Hall of Fame is Randy Anderson, who's somewhere up there in the fourth row.
Yeah,
so probably there'll be more said about him, but we are going to be able to award 2 athletes from Panama, a male and a female, an annual award in Jack's memory, and so I'm very happy about that.
So then you had a choice or an opportunity to go to college, and it's really the first time anybody from your immediate family had gone, right?
Yeah, our family had, I remember conversations as I got close to graduation is, the question was, so what are you going to do? And how about going to Marlin Rockwell? That's a good organization, good business. I had a relative that was making a good living there, and so that's what you thought of in the late '60s. I wasn't sure I wanted to do that, so I went to JCC and pursued that direction, and that led to a transfer to Fredonia and graduated with a business administration degree, which turned out to be the best thing I could have ever done.
So you went to JCC for 2 years, went to Fredonia. Again, and at a college at SUNY, was there an individual or two in the business department that sort of helped you be directed?
No one in particular. I wasn't able to be as involved on campus at either location just because I made up my mind I was going to work at the same time, and got connected in the summer of 1969 when I graduated at Quality Markets, and so I had the part-time job that was helping to pay the bills along with the cemetery work. So I was a commuter to Fredonia.
So you're grave digging, meat cutting, student laden type guy, yeah?
Shelf stocker, I didn't. Yeah,
So
right.
why quality? What
Well,
drove you there?
it was an interesting thing. My father worked in the warehouse aspect of the Super Duper chain. And Super Duper had a very strong policy about they would never hire any of the relatives. So even though he was in the warehouse...
Did Flickinger's own that?
Yeah, at that time. And there wasn't any opportunity for me to be hired, in the store end of the operation, so I went to quality. And I had some friends that, we had a couple that we knew from our church that worked there, and so they got me a job.
So what did you do there?
I did push carts, stock shelves. As the years passed, I got into more of the ordering and, again, whatever I could do with my part-time designation. When I graduated in '75 from Fredonia, then I became a co-manager up at the Mayville store, and I was there a couple years. I really liked that store. Mayville's a great little town. When Chautauqua Institution comes alive, and in the spring and summer, that store we were doubling our staff, and you really had a big store feel, even though you had a small store format. And a couple years there, and then I went to Westfield, to the quality there, and was manager for about 2.5 years.
So you told a story once when you were here, located at Prendergast, which is now Gear Done.
Yes.
For those that remember, that was a quality store way back when. When in fact you were concerned about the level of stealth, that there were things walking out the door. And you sort of took, at one time, a little self-help. Can you tell the story?
Well, it's that particular area and that particular store was driven a lot by the first of the month public assistance checks. And it would head up the first week of the month, we really did a tremendous amount of business. But there was always a certain element that thought maybe it would be great if they were able to pilfer items. And of course, I was young. Remember, I was early 20s. And I don't know if any of you know Dana Lumberg, a local attorney here. His father, Dale Lumberg, was the manager at the time. And Dale and I were he was the manager, and I probably was only 2 years younger than he was. But anyways, we had pulled a young man in. They had taken a steak and had stuffed it down his pants.
Remember if it was a T-bone, sirloin? What was it?
It was a T-bone.
T-bone? Okay.
So we had him. So
that's visual.
So Dale goes over to the payphone to call the police, and I was standing by the door with him, and all of a sudden the kid made a bolt. And of course, don't ask me why, but you reach out and you just grab his coat, and I hung on. And he dragged me, we went outside and immediately started rolling down the sidewalk. Dale's standing talking on the phone, he looks, and there we go rolling by, Anyways, he ran out. We caught the young man after we had a short meeting there in the store and decided not to put the meat back in the case.
There's a good feeling about quality.
Yeah, we were all the way.
There was a slogan, a logo, or something about quality. What was it? What was your?
Oh my, I don't know which one.
Anyway, just make one up.
Well, toward the end, we were friendly people, friendly prices. I'm sorry, I can't remember. I should. Probably sort of blotted out my memory some of those days. So, yeah.
And your various management roles. I mean, you're the stock boy that works its way up to vice president of sales.
Yeah.
And as a vice president of sales, what were you doing?
Well, I did go from a store manager to a buyer for 8 years, and that was a really fun job because you're constantly negotiating for a good deal.
Is that when you were getting those special trips down to like Daytona and stuff like that?
Can I plead the fifth? But, it was that time when there's a guy up there by the name of Rod Malloy, and it was, that relationship with some of our suppliers that opened a door for Quality Markets to sponsor Rod Malloy in a stock car. I suppose we'll get into that in a minute, but really felt that there was an audience certainly that, really needed to have some additional promotion of these products, and I was able to provide some extra dollars to Rod to help with his race car. I know we carried Folgers and Tide and a variety of, and Keebler and a variety of different food sponsors to help him and his race team.
So what was the competition? Quality?
Well, we had, I mean, Super Duper was strong, which became, and then we had Loblaws, which became Bell's, it came the Apple stores, and so, and there was A&P. When I started in '69, the A&P store, there was one on 3rd Street, which ultimately ended up in Brooklyn Square, where the JAMA building, or no, it was over where the Big Lots site is now, so.
Was there something called Gold Star?
That's down
Was
across.
that a one-off down in?
Yes, it was across from where the, I'll say Z&M or Land Pro, the John Deere dealer, is today. It was right across the street. And they were a viable entity.
This is a personal flashback. I just remember going with my grandparents one night every week, because they pulled some card, some number, something, and you won $50 or something. The place parking lot was totally full, which has nothing to do with anything whatsoever. So you're there for quality for 27 years, and then sort of there's a moment in time where there's downsizing, and you get caught up in that.
Yeah, the quality, there was not a better place to work under the ownership of the Reading family, Jack and Dick, and I would always would comment about Dick Reading being a mentor, because he really showed me what a good businessman was all about, and how to run a business, and how to recruit good people, how to take care of people. Quality was, you know, if you had a position with Quality and you were not able to perform at the level that they wanted you to, they would just find you another one. And they eventually would find you the right spot for you, and you'd want to be there for the rest of your life. It was just a great place to work. But then as time, obviously, the business got sold to Penn Traffic. Penn Traffic was then acquired by an investment company out of New York City who had no idea about the supermarket business. And the chairman of the board, Gary Hirsch, felt that he wanted to own all the supermarkets and be the biggest supermarket entrepreneur there was. And he started making a lot of very serious and very poor business decisions, and that was the beginning of the end. And I hung on to as long as I could. The last 4 years I was executive vice president, but I had more jobs than you could imagine. They kept eliminating positions and just say, well, you can do that. I made 75 trips in 18 months to Syracuse and back for corporate meetings and so forth. And so all of a sudden one day I got a call, and they asked me to be there at the corporate office. And when I got there, all the division leaders, some were presidents, some were executive vice presidents, we were all lined up in the hall. And the first one was my boss at the end. And slowly, one by one, they called us all in and fired every one of us. And and on the drive back home, I had become very good friends with Don Meyer. Don Meyer was the publisher of the Post-Journal. And Don had been, because of Quality Markets, Don and I had worked very closely together with all of our advertising. And I knew that the position at the Community Foundation was open. I called Don and talked to him about it on the way back from Syracuse, and he said, well, they haven't started the search process yet. That was in May. We expect to start that in June, so if you're interested, apply. And so I did.
Jeanette talked about you being one of the highly qualified applicants at the time. Are you curious about who the other highly qualified applicants were?
Well, I don't know if I ought to say this on tape or not, but the pile of all the applicants were left in a box in the foundation office, and I might have scanned through just to see who they were. You know, you asked about competition. Of course, I was curious about my competition. You know, and I will say that Jeanette it was not a shoo-in, because I had 3 interviews, and they really put me through the paces. So,
what was your impression of the Community Foundation? I mean, you're on the outside, you're in the corporate world, you're the quality, you've contained a bunch of positions, and here you are, 20-some 20 years ago, they offer you this job. What did you really know about it?
Well, during this search process, I should say that as soon as I was without a job and obviously had a family and kids are thinking about going to college, I was certainly concerned. So I knew I was interested in this position. Russ Dietrich and I had served together in a number of different charitable activities, and Russ had always talked so highly of the Community Foundation and everything that they were doing in the community. Also, another name that was Ken Strickler, and Ken Strickler was basically the #1 person that helped found the Community Foundation. And I'll never forget one day, I should back up and say I knew Ken because Ken sold typewriters and he was in the quality office. So I met him that way initially, but one day I bumped into him at one of the, it was Jamestown Savings Bank locations, and he had just come from an investment committee meeting, and he had the investment report with him, and he said, "Randy, look at how good the Community Foundation is doing." Ken was so proud of the foundation and everything that it was doing at that time. And so I knew a little bit about it, so then immediately I researched at least 1 or 2 books, and I started reading about a community foundation and the kinds of things they do. I picked up, there was not a lot of websites in those days, so there wasn't a lot of information, but I went and got as many annual reports as I could find, and because I popped in the office and picked up things, and I just tried to educate myself as much as I could on the things that they do, why they do them. Some of my time as Vice President of Sales for Quality, we had got very involved in the community and trying to give back to the community in charitable efforts. And I could see there was a parallel there that certainly fascinated me to no end. So it really felt like the right place for me.
As you dove into this, and maybe guidance for Tori Ergang. Tori is here, by the way. I just want to shout out. She's Randy's successor. Welcome, and may it be a long and fruitful experience. What was the surprise, Randy? You walk in day one, and you start learning this, and the kind of either the good, the bad, something that you didn't quite expect.
Well, there was certainly a lot more. The thing that I couldn't really identify up front is one, the amount of grant making that they were doing, support to the nonprofits. I knew that they were doing some scholarship activity, but had no idea the amount of it, even at that time. I met one of the first people I walked through the door, who is still there today, is Jake Schranz. Jake with his, he was a little younger then, had a little mustache, and but didn't we all? Reached out, shook my hand, and he introduced me to this world of finance. So there's these elements within the foundation that I really was not that familiar with, was surprising. I also begin to see that there was probably a lot more opportunity, for the foundation. One of the assignments that the board of directors had indicated is, at that particular time, we were located on the 3rd floor of what is Willow Bay building today. It was the Commons Mall at that time. And basically, if you went through the front door, and if you wanted to go up the stairs, it was a miracle if you found us. If you took the elevator sometimes on a cold morning would stop along the way when you didn't want it to. So they really felt that the best thing, for the foundation is we got to have more exposure. People do not know what we are, what we do, and so we began a search for the location we're in now, and actually made that acquisition in the fall of 1999.
National Fuel Gas Building.
It was, yeah.
Over this time period, Randy, you've seen the Community Foundation grow to a point where you're in excess of 90 million, getting close to 100 million, which is a goal which I'm sure all of us who previously were involved could never have imagined. What do you attribute that to?
Oh, by the way, we are at 99,800,000 as of the end of today.
In your by the way, Susan mentioned, in your newsletters, is in fact an envelope with a Community Foundation envelope in it. So if you want to be the one, and I would recommend the Sweeney Fund if you want, but thank you for bringing that up. But yeah, you're so fantastic. Well, anyways, what do you attribute that to?
Well, Jeanette touched on it. I could tell early on that the organization was not necessarily the most aggressive fundraiser. It wasn't the organization that's out there, with their arm around a lot of people and maybe saying, please give, that kind of thing. It was all done through, showcasing the services that we offer. So and Jeanette touched on it, I really felt that it was important for me to begin to develop a face of the organization. So, and I've enjoyed that. I mean, I want to thank my father, who people say I become more like him all the time. I always said he could talk to a fence post and have the greatest conversation ever, and I am just as bad, if not worse. But I really enjoy the people side of it, and it's been great to meet so many people, and people that walk through the door at the foundation, and many times they are unsure of what it is we do, and they just have heard about us, but they don't, and it takes a while for that relationship to develop. And many times, as I had commented to someone earlier this evening, they come at a time of tragedy, a sense of loss, and if we can help develop that relationship and provide them some closure to a particular sad event, I really feel good about it. But that's been what it's all about. And the other part of that is, how do you, we're a nonprofit organization. I do not have a multi-million-dollar budget for advertising. So as Jeanette, mentioned about my picture in the paper, that was, the plan behind that was you would be able to identify the wide, broad-based services that the foundation offers. All the grants that we make to the many different organizations, as well as, the number of individuals that we've been able to make contact with, and the number of organizations, nonprofit organizations that we've worked closely with over the years.
One of those is the Robert H. Jackson Center that you work closely with. I think for the camera, why don't you give it just a thumbnail of how you got involved here?
Well, Jeanette touched on it just a little bit, and she's, exactly, it's true. Carl Kappa, who had been very involved in the establishment of the Chautauqua Region Community Foundation. And as I, joined the foundation staff, I went back and tried to meet some of the, those that were involved, and had a chance, through Jeanette, to meet Carl. And we had more than one conversation, but one day he had indicated to me, he said, I think I got one more. Carl's had he's had a great career in business and in philanthropy. He said, I think I got one more project I want to work on. I'm not sure what it is. It might be something downtown. And whatever comes along, would you be willing to, give him a hand? And I said, well, Carl's someone you don't really say no. And certainly I felt indebted to him because of his role with the Community Foundation. And then slowly, as Carl, and I remember the day, Greg, that you and I sat here right on this stage, and it was cold that day in January. And Betty and Carl and Tom Cardman, and I think Dan Bratton might have been standing up there. And the whole conversation about the establishment of this organization. It's the first time maybe it was had in this location. I know it had been discussed previously.
Yeah, that took on a whole lot. But yeah, Randy was right at the beginning. You hosted the first board meetings. You became its first secretary treasurer, and Jeanette was watching me. They were both bird-dogging me with Carl's encouragement. So kudos to both of you. You have over 300 scholarship funds, nearly 700 funds, many of them, some of them benefit the Jackson Center. Again, how does that pitch resonate, and how has that impacted the community?
Well, obviously, the 700 funds, let me just take the scholarship piece first. Currently, I think probably at the time I got there, we We were giving out possibly a couple $100,000 in scholarships. That number is now $1.2 million. We're impacting, we're reaching and able to help over 700 students, in the area today with some level of financial assistance. As you commented about the designated or agency funds that help the Jackson Center, there's in the 200 plus there. That number is around $800,000–900,000 a year now that is given out to them. And in each case, multiple funds. It was about 225 funds when I got there, and now close to 700. They all were established by generally an individual that want to do something charitable. That's the thing about this area. Philanthropy is something that people here understand and always have. I hope that's something that'll carry on in future generations. But normally it's a one-on-one situation, and I want to certainly thank June Dietrich is out there somewhere. June has, especially in the last 8–10 years, she's been a tremendous help when it comes to that development and that relationship building. And building the initial relationship is part A, but part B is make sure you sustain it and making sure that you're staying in contact with your donors and they're pleased with the relationship that they've established.
I hope you continue to stay established with the Randy Sweeney Fund, so if you can make sure somebody's on top of that one. By the way, in a very short period of time, I don't know if you know this, but it's over $5,000 has been contributed, and recently one of your close friends, Roland Swanson, gave a charitable gift annuity naming that fund. So it's a tribute, one of the many, many tributes to you, and frankly, I have a whole file full of all these other tributes, but I'm going to segue. There is a dark side of Randy.
We were doing so well. we were doing really well, actually. Okay, all right, now you're getting serious.
What I have here is a hat. It's a hat which has Malloy Racing 78. We have in our audience Rod Malloy, who was the driver for Malloy Racing, along with his brother Larry, who's here. And they're all part of a racing scene at State Line Speedway. We have in the second row, in case this place gets out of control, the Sammy Lamancuso 27L racing team. They're really the bodyguards for tonight.
They're my bodyguard.
So you can see there they are. They got their jackets and. And one of the things, Randy, that you and I have got to a closer relationship over is something which I knew nothing about to speak of. This whole wild world of dirt racing at a place like State Line Speedway. And how did you get interested in this?
Well, again, I mentioned we lived in Niobe, and we were right on the pathway of all the stock cars going from the Erie racing area to State Line. So as a kid, we would stand out there, we'd watch on Saturday night and watch all the race cars go by. Well, I think it was 1965, my dad and mother decided to take us over one night. That was bad. It was the wrong thing to do. Instantly, we were fans. I think we only went once that year, but then the next year we were there all the time, and it worked out well for them for a while because they would. My brother Larry is a couple years younger, so they'd take us over, drop us off at the racetrack, and then they would wait. And when they see all the cars go by the house, they would come over and pick us up. Because we always wanted to go to the pits, and see the drivers and get the autographs. And that's how it started. We had sort of an interest in cars. My grandfather was the chief mechanic for the Chautauqua County Highway Department, and he had a beautiful two-car garage with all the tools in the world. And we did a lot of we fixed everything on our cars. And I should say, my dad and uncles and my grandfather, and I was the guy holding the light for many years. So we just got interested in cars, and then the racing thing, I mean, took over. I remember my aunt, she sewed and made my brother and I both racing jackets with homemade, letters on the back, and it got to be our entire life.
Did you have any idea this whole world? My gosh.
It was our entire life, though, as kids. If it rained on Saturday night, oh, man, devastation. We missed the night. And then, occasionally we'd really get a bonus. My dad would say, what if we went to Erie on Sunday night? We got 2 nights of racing instead of 1. So it was great. And
so was there a certain driver, a personality that you gravitated towards?
Well, I was Johnny Whitehead, number 39, the Flying Farmer. My brother was Ronnie Blackmer, Ford Jr. primarily at that time. And there was a time where I really, as we got a little bit older, my parents started both going. And most of you do not know my mother, but my mother got right into it. She became a big Squirt Johns fan. And I never forget going over in the pits afterwards, and my mother going right up to Squirt to get his I can't go anywhere, to get his autograph. Well, that was a big deal. And we just had a lot of fun with it over the years. So
that was 5'11", right?
5'11", yeah.
Okay. And then at one point you went from being a spectator and learning how to drive a car through being a field car. Larry Malloy was just telling me about your other life.
Yeah.
Could you first of all, talk a little bit about how you became a driver yourself out in the field.
Well, I had a cousin that he was a few years older than I am, and he had raced in a demolition derby, and he had a '56 Buick, which took a lot of beating on the back, but it still, from the back wheels forward was great. And so we just took and cut it off right behind the rear wheels. The whole back end was open. Well, and so we started racing it in the field. And of course, if you think about a car that's cut off right behind the rear wheels, where's the gas tank? So this was high-level safety. We were thinking of safety all the time. We had a plastic jug with the gas line stuck into it, tied to the back of the driver's seat. And so, but you can't race with one car. You got to have 2. So I can't remember, all of a sudden we found a Ford Falcon, and I don't remember where it came from, but so that we had 2 cars. Interesting thing, the Falcon, at some point in time, the rear end went out of it, and we found a station wagon, and brought that home, turned it upside down, took the rear end out, and put it in the other one. But then the gear ratios were so different that you had to shift that all the time on the corners. But I tell you, we had a lot of fun. I remember the day that one Saturday afternoon, we were out there, and it was dusty, and the old Buick that I always raced had no windshield. I had goggles, that's all. And my dad came down off the hill from my grandfather's, and it was just this huge cloud of dust. And the lady across the street was trying to paint her house. And he came out and said, I think you guys better not. But we had a lot of fun. And a friend of ours brought his little Chevy Nova down and left it. Well, little did he know that in the 60s, the key was on the dash. And he didn't realize he left the key in it and everything. Well, we didn't know we were supposed to not race it, just, it was there. And so we had one of the things we did, and this is the last story, is we used to we used to think that night racing was fun. So you turn the dome lights on in the cars. That's all you had. We didn't have any headlights. So we raced with just the dome lights on so you could see everybody else, And well, my friend, when he came back to look at his little Chevy Nova, he said, well, we had T-boned it, the door was bent, and, he just couldn't figure out what had happened. He wasn't there that night,
Did you fess up?
Well, he couldn't race much longer anyways. His wife came and watched what we were doing, and she grabbed him by the ear and dragged him right out of there. She says, "You've got a family, you've got responsibilities, you can't be out there."
This was all in Niobe?
All in Niobe. It obviously at a field that we used to raise cattle in, and it became the racetrack instead.
So I'm looking at number 78. There's Rod and Larry there. How did you connect with those guys?
Well, Rod was the guy down the road. He was in Watts Flats. And of course, we'd always watched him. And as time went on, we got
Now, just so I got a handle, Watts Flats, was that like urban from Niobe?
there were
What's
some.
the suburb there?
We were about 4 or 5 miles apart, and they had their own downtown center, church.
Four Corners.
No.
No Four Corners there?
Well, sort of. They didn't line up quite right, but you might call it a Four Corners. But we were neighboring metropolises for sure, so all fighting our way to the next level. But we got to know Rod and got to hang around with him a little bit. And Rod could always make more. He could have more success with less than anybody I ever knew. Rod built cars out of junkyards, and he was a good driver. He got a lot done with whatever he had, and I always found that to be really fascinating, because a lot of guys had more money, had more resources, but Rod could get a lot done with what he had. So,
how long were you with Rod? What did you do? Did you get greasy? And did you
well, it came
things?
along, and I think it was about 73 or 83, 84. Rod, somewhere in there. I reached out to him about the sponsorship with Quality. And of course, putting the name of the supermarket chain on a stock car, I had to ask. And the attorneys said, it's fine, it's advertising, but you, Randy Sweeney, keep your hands off it. We don't want you directly involved at all. So I never did anything but stand around with my hands in my pocket, and during those years with Quality. But I think we helped get the team, and Rod got a chance to, he was in cadet at the time and had some success there, and then he was able to go up to the super late level within a short year or two.
Were you ever able to get out on the track? I mean, you were a field car expert, obviously. Did you ever get out on the state line track?
I think Rod might have let me take the Sportsman once or twice, and I might have made a few laps, but that's all. I never was out there otherwise. So.
You did race wheelbarrows.
Oh, thank you. That's another story.
Again, I got time. How about you guys? Wheelbarrow.
Well, state line, I don't know whose crazy idea it was to have a wheelbarrow race. So anyways, this was in the 70s, and one of the young men from Watts Flats lettered up. We had our wheelbarrow all painted up. We advertised our cemetery business. It was Sweeney's Cemetery Service. Our logo was "Why walk when you can ride?" So, anyways, my cousin and I practiced and practiced, and for some crazy reason, he decided he wanted to wear spikes, and he was going to be the first. You have somebody in the wheelbarrow, somebody pushing it, and you had to switch at least once. So he was going to take the first leg. Well, he had spikes on. Well, for those of you that, spikes in a clay racetrack, well, he went 3 feet, the spike stuck, he fell on his face, and we were a quarter of a lap behind. So anyway, I was supposed to be the guy to bring it in, and so we switched at that point, and I ended up running almost the whole way around, and we finished last. One time.
Now, you continued your interest in things state line. You found various outlets, and one of them was joining up with a guy named Randy Anderson. Talk about that Legacy Fund project.
I want to just do one more thing with Rod, if I can.
Sure.
In about it was in the late 90s, my son, who was in the 14, 15 year age, and I was done with Quality at that time. It was 97, 98. And Rod had had a devastating fire at his garage and lost one of the better race cars maybe you ever had. But my son, he allowed my son and I to come back and get our hands a little dirty. And Rod, I want to take this opportunity to thank you for allowing us to do that. That meant so much to me and meant so much to my son Adam. You will never know. But he didn't let us do anything too serious because Rod had a lot of success around the 2001, 2003, 4 season. He actually was champion again in 2007. And but I want to thank you for letting Adam and I hang around, because that meant a lot to him, meant a lot to me. We had a lot of fun, got a lot of memories, a lot of wins. So I want to tell you, it was a lot of fun.
And there is a DVD on that, Rod Malloy's career, and you kind of tribute to him.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is all part of a set of stuff, part of the Legacy Fund at the Community Foundation. Mm-hmm. So how did you get cranked into that world?
Well, and you could help me. I think it was in the fall of 2008, I think it was. Greg and Randy Anderson and I opened up the newspaper one day, and there's a picture of Emery Mann. Emery Mann on page 2, the obituary, Emery had passed. We had had casual conversations for years about the fact that that we needed to do something with the legacy of State Line Speedway. It meant a lot to all of us. There's a State Line Speedway Greg Peterson story too, but we'll talk about that some other time. But
not my night.
Yeah. But we decided at that point in time, that we needed to do something to capture that. And I want to say Greg and Randy have been the driver. I just have rode along in the back seat. I became the money guy, though, as time went on. And that led to a number of wonderful interviews with, we just lost Marv Thorpe not long ago. And I remember that same day, I think that was the day we went and visited with Squirt Johns. And it was just great to, connect with these. And certainly that guy there in the second row, Sammy Lamancuso, probably will go down and this is no surprise to the pit crew, knowing Sammy, but when we were going to interview Sammy, we got to his house. Sammy had everything laid out, all the pictures. He had everything just as they would know Sammy did everything. Very detailed, and we had a great interview with Sammy too, and it's so many of those drivers are no longer with us. And it was great enjoyment for, I know, all three of us. And along the way, Greg got to learn a lot more about dirt track racing. So.
Yeah, it even went into Sam's car and did a lap around, which is the whole
another whole story.
That whole rehab, in case you're curious, this whole group did an amazing job of taking a car that Sam Levinson had parked in 1972, right after we finished it, right in a barn, just as is. And a few years ago, through the encouragement of Mike Latone, the band got together and rehabbed the whole car back to its original state, showcased at State Line. It's about hours and hours on YouTube, magic moment. And thank you for coming tonight, guys. This is really special for all of us, and appreciate this. So, Randy, what's your greatest racing story? What's the funniest thing? Something that's
funny,
really offbeat. I mean, you've told us some funny things already, but what's the one that we haven't talked about yet?
I don't know if I have a funny story or not. I know there was always some interesting things in the pits, right, Rod? Yeah. Well, there was always some situations, and Rod was really not in the middle of any of them, but there was always a bump here and a spin out there, and you always wondered if there was going to be somebody coming up through the pits with a bar, to settle the score. But Rod was a good driver, a good clean driver. He didn't have too much of that. I'm not sure if I can come up with a real good story. I probably ought to ask Rod to come down here and join me. If you've got one you think I might have been there, go ahead. Yeah. It's just an interesting time when you're around in the pits with a race team, and then there's a camaraderie in the pits that's just hard to explain to anybody. I mean, Yes, you don't tell too many secrets, but you get to be friends doing things that you love to do. You all love to do this, and so you get to be friends, and it's a special time, it really is.
Well, you know, if you notice, the passion level of Randy has kicked up another 5 notches when we got into racing, State Line Speedway, and that whole process. And I really think of no other way to sort of draw closure to tonight's evening of celebration and a recognition that you have been a winner, have always been a winner and a champion, than to draw out the foremost flagman from State Line Speedway, Spanky Hall.
Oh,
Spanky,
yeah.
come
Hey,
out.
Spanky. Hey, Spanky! Let me tell you about this guy. Nobody does what he does. I'm telling you, nobody does. He is the best, and he's right just up the road on Saturday night. So.
Well, thanks, Randy.
Yeah, Spanky.
I'll tell you what, it's proud to know this guy. Call him a friend.
Yeah. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Spanky. We are going to draw closure. There's a gift here from the Robert H. Jackson Center.
Thank you.
For all that you've meant to us. But I know all of you want to shake Randy's hand. And in order to make that a reality and to make that special and to tie you in with your best friend Rod Malloy, Randy Anderson is going to sit over there with you.
Okay.
And we have an 8x10 picture, which you will autograph to everybody as they walk out as a gift from you to them, because I know you want to do that.
Glad to.
And just so you know what it is, why you want it, because there is none like it. There is no picture like this. And it's a picture of Randy with his passion, Raceway, and he's with Rod Malloy. And maybe if you pay Rod enough or make a significant contribution to the Sweeney Fund, he'll sign it also. 8x10 picture of you with a mustache. With the car number
I'm trying to see
78.
Oh, yes.
So that is the picture. That is what Randy will sign. We'll put it in an envelope for you, so you don't have to worry about it, because I think it might be snowing. And there's so that's a special gift from him. He didn't know this was happening. From him to you, and with our thanks for coming tonight, honoring Randy Sweeney. So thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
So Randy will be right over here.
I don't know. It's just the way it happened. Yeah, it's just the way it happened. I don't know what to draw. A lot of good memories. Well, here we are at State Line Speedway. Sam, okay. Tell him to hold this race up. We'll be out here in just a second. All right. Light your glasses on. Light your glasses on. I'll hold your glasses. You can put the helmet on. Hey, Dick wants to be in this next one coming out. If you want to hold it up, he's got to be in the first lane model. Light your glasses back. Hold him up till he gets out there. Back in. Put your helmet on. I don't need him anyway. Yes, this one. back.
Yeah, I hear you. I just...
Put your hand in here and go like this. That's it, yeah. Hey, that's a thrill of a lifetime. You give me my money's worth, but that's something I'll never forget.
Well, I thought you were
an excellent racer.
Yeah, you were. See if you can take your helmet. So, what'd you think about that trip out on the track?
Hey, it was a thrill of a lifetime. He didn't lay back a bit. Boy, he just went right after him. I didn't realize what was going on. You don't realize what's going on, you get out there. By golly. Bart, he didn't lay back in. No, he's the type of guy who don't like to lose.
Yeah. So did you, what about when those two cars spun out in front of you?
Wow, I thought, here we go. We're going to be in that mess, but he right up, dodged them all, and away we went again.
Yeah.
Yeah. By golly, that was, I'll never forget that. That was sure nice thing to have happen to me. I really appreciate the racetrack let me do it, and him being willing to do it, you know. Putting it all together was really a great event.
Well, I'm glad you had a chance. It doesn't happen for everybody, that's for sure.
I guess so. It's really, you might call it a privileged thing happened to me, you know.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it, never forget it.
Well, that's good.